flummox me because none of these people are devoted to a transcendent value system, unless you're calling art a transcendent value system, which I don't believe it is. I'm thinking that the models for like a good marriage do not make for entertaining cinema. It's far more enthralling for me certainly, to watch a movie where characters are hopping in and out of each other's bed. I mean, that's interesting, but to people building a life around values and rituals, it's not particularly cinematic. And I know this is kind of dirty pool in a way, but with Woody Allen and co., I often feel like they're making movies to justify their way of life. I mean, I wonder what type of take on relationships would be produced by somebody who'd been with one woman for 40 years.
Right. Right.
Like there seems to be kind of a fatalistic thread in Woody Allen's work in this movie that, you know, boys will be boys and girls will be girls and will, you know, screw each other over and screw each other's wives and will get nicked and maybe shot a little bit, and this is just the way of the world.
Right. Well, that, you know, I think, you know, that for sure is a kind of Woody Allen sub-theme. But I would say even if you didn't think of a lot to say when you came out of the movie, you got to use the word flummoxed twice. Right now. Now, that is very rare, Levy, that person gets to use that word even once to deploy it. So to get to use it twice, I think we've actually accomplished the purpose of our dialogue at this point. But
what were some of the other models for relationship that you saw in the movie?
So let's look at it. Yeah, that'd be fun. So what do we have so far? We have the kind of model of partnership, but partnership revolving around shared creativity. That's kind of model one. Right. You know, the second model is what I might call the Balabatish model. You know, Balabatish being that wonderful, you know, semi, you know, Hebrew Yiddishized word, you know, Bal Habayit, which means, you know, the Buddhist term for it would be a householder. You know, a kind of, you know, we call it, say, a layperson in the kind of Jewish community world, but it means a householder, meaning a person who's not, you know, aiming for spiritual leadership, you know, that crazy, insane thing. You know, a person who's, you know, living a, you know, productive, good, successful life and wants to build a nice house and a nice home and, you know, raise, you know, lovely kids and have good dinner parties with the friends, you know, et cetera. You know, and so that was really the second model. The second model I would call not the creative artistic model, but the householder model. You know, and the householder model, you know, is of course her would-be and in fact, you know, was in the end, you know, intended, you know, groom whose name escapes me. You know, they're going to build their house in Connecticut someplace. And, you know, here, you know, Woody Allen was basically mocking that value.
Yeah.
Just mocking that house. You know, he was, you know, he had them meet, you know, 2 or 3 times, you know, in the movie. He had them meet like another couple. They were at dinner with another couple, and they're talking about, you know, who you're going to get to remodel the house. And, you know, he kind of made that into kind of a vapid kind of, you know, image. And I think the reason is really because of what you just said, Levy, because, you know, he couldn't quite imagine, you know, a householder couple building a home with transcendent value, you know, with a higher vision, you know, with a deeper sense of purpose and with a larger sense, you know, of meaning. And so the only way he could find meaning was in, you know, not the Oedipus, but, you know, the edifice complex. You know, let's build the big house, right? And it was actually what the only vapidness that actually emerged there was that of the movie maker. He actually couldn't imagine or find a way to see into, you know, the real gorgeousness and beauty, you know, of a life lived and built together, you know, out of the public frame, you know, working, being productive, you know, creating children. And the reason was that he didn't quite understand what it's all about. And that's the idea of kind of transmitting values to children. Didn't occur to him.
Right.
You know, the idea of, you know, a chain of generations, you know, standing for, incarnating, personifying, you know, sets of ideas and values, you know, the ideas of faith history that stand against power history, you know, the idea of integrity that stands against, you know, the trammeling, you know, of the weak. You know, in other words, just holding, incarnating those values, it just didn't occur to him. You know, the image of the old Jewish mother, who reads Psalms, and who then becomes a grandmother and who sits with her grandchildren and transmits, her experience of the divine that she got from reading Psalms every day, and her sense of being, kind of God intoxicated and a deep, profound lover of people. This old wrinkled grandmother transmitting her experience to her children and her grandchildren. He just couldn't come anywhere near that. And so the only thing he could do was to caricature, and mock, the emptiness of, the householder model, and make it appear to be but an Oedipus complex, which, I think you're completely correct in your analysis. It was really more of a reflection of the limits of Woody Allen's imagination than the limits of genuine possibility.
Right.
So that would I think would be maybe the second model. The second model. But I mean, Levi, before we go to a third model, I mean, Levi, let's get real here. You know what I mean? And between you and me, we've each been married an average of 1.5 times.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I mean, Levi, we got to get you to a wedding, man.
Yes.
I mean, it's like we got to get this moving here. I mean,
well, I'm sure that good married is better than good singlehood, but I'm also sure that bad marriage was worse than bad singlehood. So.
I think that's probably correct. Well, I actually have to say that I think marriage is one of the most gorgeous things in the world. But I haven't been particularly successful at it at this stage of life. But I intend to actually do it again with God's help. I don't have any particular intended in mind. But for all sorts of reasons, I didn't engage it in the right way and with the right people. All bless them all. But you can actually fail at something for a variety of reasons, and you can either say, hey, it didn't work for this and that reason, or you can actually mock and rip down the institution, in order to kind of hide the fact that you actually didn't do that well at it. So I actually prefer, the more honest path, which is I think marriage is, although it's often a mess, it's ultimately, like, Churchill said about democracy, right? A complete mess, but the best thing we have.
Well, as someone who's been divorced 3 times, what do you suspect are the essential ingredients for a good marriage?
Well, I would say like this. Number one, as I said to my son, who was with me here all week, and I had just a beautiful time with him with Yair. I said to him, Yair, there's many things that I want you to do, and really, I can really model it for you. I said, I can't quite model the marriage thing, but if you're married more than once, I will kill you. So, I think, for me, I have no advice to give anyone, but for me, marriage, is about partnership, and it's about a certain kind of partnership in the places in which I, really feel, most alive and where I feel I have most to share and to give. Those places are about, teaching, studying, practicing, writing, creating community, all those things. Mm-hmm. And for me, one of the things I've learned is that I need to, marry a person who's willing to be, my full partner in the world, and who's really a kind of, a profoundly equal partner, with her own teaching, with her own Torah, and a person who really can also, whose I can respect. There's a very, very beautiful idea in the Torah that a woman's a helpmate against you, right? And so a helpmate against you, of course, means very beautifully, but if the person actually can't stand against you, then you actually remain lonely, right? It's not good for a human being to be lonely. I will create a helpmate against you. Let's work it out here. And the deep resolution is that actually to move beyond loneliness, we need to be with a person who's really an equal other, who we kind of respect profoundly, in the areas that are important to us. And for me, many areas are important, but for me personally, like a deep partner in the world, is something that I wouldn't suggest as a model for most people. But for me, I've learned that it's important, and that's really where I went wrong. And I really married people who weren't able to do that, then I kind of asked them to do that anyways, And that's always an unfair thing to do to someone. You can't ask someone to be what they're not. They need to be the beauty that they are. So that's in my particular case. But Levi, what's your excuse? I mean, Levi, how old are you? You're 42, right?
42.
42. So if there's anyone listening here, please call me. I'll give you all the vital information. I mean, I think you've never been married, have you?
Never been married.
Levi, 42.
Yeah.
At 18.